Welcome to another episode of the We Have a Meeting podcast. So today we have the privilege of hosting a retired FBI agent renowned for his expertise in behavioral analysis, trust building and communication. With a distinguished career spanning decades, this guest today is the author of influential books like The Code of Trust, imparting invaluable insights into forging connections and understanding human behaviour. His unwavering commitment to integrity and empathy makes him a true authority in ethical communication. Today I'm excited to dive deep into the conversation with Robin Dreeke. Robin, how are you?
I'm very well, Jack. Thanks for having me on. And thanks for such a great intro. You kind of hit some key highlights in there, especially at the end, that really do mean a lot to me. And that is ethics. The way we communicate with others and make it about them without an ask, free of an agenda, is really uncommon these days. But it really is at the true core of how to make a good, strong, healthy connection and alliance with others. So, yeah.
I'm a big fan. I know that a lot of people use the catchphrase "make sales great again." I'm working to making sales ethical again because I've bought too many dodgy cars from dodgy car salespeople. So ethics and ethical, we're on the same page. So we start our podcast in the same way every single time, Robin, and it's best to flip it over to you. But who are you and what problem do you solve?
Who am I? That is a really profoundly deep question. It's a great opening question and one that can never really truly be answered, depending on the context in which you see the world through. I apologize. I give what called narrative answers to narrative questions. So I'll give you the canned the collection of my experiences. I'll give you that answer for who I am. So my experiences are, I went to the United States Naval Academy. I became a Marine Corps officer after I graduated from the Naval Academy. I joined the FBI in 1997. I got assigned to work in the New York City field office where my job was counterintelligence, and most of the time I was recruiting Russian military intelligence officers or GRU officers and protect national security of the United States. Part of that time period, I got on our behavioral analysis program where we strategized human engagements, where we did recruitment operations, double agent operations, espionage investigations, as I say, all the hooky spooky spy stuff. I took over our team a number of years later. I taught at our Quantico facility at the FBI Training Academy all the advanced skills and techniques for interpersonal communication for this area of counterintelligence. And retired back in 2018. Along the way, I wrote 3 books, all on really the skills I learned throughout my life about how to balance the dichotomy between self and others, because most of us, all of us, at one time or another, we have that dichotomy out of balance, and sometimes it's too much us. It's off-putting to others. Sometimes it's too much others, which can be very draining to us. And so maintaining the balance of this dichotomy where we can take care of ourselves so we can be of service to others is really the core balance, and then how to communicate that.
Okay. And I don't want to go too deep and too personal into the inner child, Robin, but why do you solve that problem? Why are you so passionate about it?
It's actually another great question. It's the reason why each of us does anything, and it really comes down to our origin story, our core essence. I love to say that most of us are born pretty equal in our biology and chemistry and all the chemical balances going on in the brain. Yes, some ebbs and flows. There's a couple Einsteins here and there. But for the most part, we're born pretty equal. We all are born with a curiosity. The curiosity is a survival mechanism, because at the core of all of us, we just want to feel safe. And so feeling safe to me growing up, where I was bullied, I was an only child. We had to heat our house all by wood because we didn't have money. It made me very gritty and resilient, but also I wanted to be liked. And so when you put all these things together in that formative years of life between the ages of roughly 6 and 19, it forges who we are. And part of that equation for me was I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to inspire people to greatness, but my dichotomy was a bit out of balance. And so it became a lifelong pursuit to balance the dichotomy, make it about others, and be a great leader and a great communicator, because the desire was there because of the experiences I had at a young age. So That's where it all came from, and that's the origin story of really learning how to communicate effectively with others.
And it's a fine line, isn't it? Because the skills and the talent and the natural being that you've become, there is that fine line, I think, between like influential, which I would put you in the category of, and manipulation, which the skills that you use, you could use them for good or for evil. It's the same kind of thing. Do you think there was like a driving factor that pushed you into the I want to help and be the good guy rather than kind of the manipulation side and the other side of it all?
Sure, failure. And each of us defines failure a bit differently. And for me, failure was when I saw if I had a negative impact on another human being. In other words, I induced stress, I induced discomfort, I gave them a buyer's remorse for having an engagement with me. That destroyed me inside. Because yes, that type A personality, Naval Academy, Marine Corps, FBI, that is screaming at you, extroverted type A, I want to take over the world. There is no doubt. I wanted to win. I am ultra competitive. And so winning, if you have that origin story, means I have to make myself look good. And it wasn't that I was disregarding intentionally other people. It wasn't even entering my calculus. I wasn't even entering my mind that I need to be able to communicate in terms of them. But because each of us that goes through a trauma earlier on in life, and most of us do, we become highly aware of nonverbal and behaviors of people around us because we want to feel safe. And when we see discomfort or stress with those around us, we ask ourselves, am I safe? And so we become really good readers of people. So I was very good at reading when people were uncomfortable around me, and I owned it. I was like, I am doing something to create that behavior which makes me feel bad because I made them feel bad. And so it was that shift that made me say, I want to do better at this. So yeah, I started out doing what I called the cheap carnival tricks of eliciting PIN numbers, dates of birth, all the things we need to do to get the reps in to understand why humans do what they do, to really boil it down to really a simple thing, trust. And at the root of trust is what can you do to inspire someone to feel safe? And use that word influence there. I don't even like the words influence and persuade because it's still too self-centered for me. I like inspiration because inspiration, in other words, when you're inspiring someone, you're helping them unlock what's within them without any outside influence from me, with transparency, because the greatest mitigator of manipulation for me is just be transparent. If you have a question, I'll answer it. If I can, and if I can, I'll tell you why I can. If there's a rule, policy, regulation, because ultimately the greatest behaviors of trust are open, honest communication, transparency, vulnerability, and then when you couple that with competence that I can deliver on the things that I say I can, that is a recipe for a great relationship that someone wants to have with you.
Very, very, very great answer. You mentioned there, like obviously the word persuade. I'm with you on that one. Persuade and convince. My gran used to say you can take a horse to water, but you can't get him to buy anything he doesn't want to buy, or something like that. A lot of people get confused and they think my job as a salesperson, or in your line of work, which I want to get into in a moment. Why can't we persuade or convince someone to do something if they don't want to do it? I mean, what's the psychology when it comes to persuasion?
They don't feel safe. You can get someone to do something. Yeah, all these skills and tactics that these high pressure salespeople use, they are extremely effective because they are levers of influence. Robert Cialdini's book Influence, it goes through the 6 levers of influence. They're all very powerful. Robert Greene in his book The 48 Laws of Power goes through the human psychology and the behaviors about power. But each one of these things are exceptionally self-centered. And I also don't judge these things are right or wrong, good or bad. They just are. And if you want to assess your impact on the people around you and ask yourself that profound question that I love, that Robin Sharma wrote a great book called Who Will Cry When You Die? Ask yourself that question. It's like, who will actually miss you? Are you that, think about, there's another great analogy I'd love to use to kind of right our ship if we're starting to skew off course. And that is, ask yourself, who do you love walking through that door? during the course of your day? Who do you love when you see an email come in, a text come in, or a phone call come in? Who do you actually light up and like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, so-and-so is going to talk to me today? Ask yourself, are they using the 4 keys of communication? And I'll get into it if you want later, but it's really the biggest one there is, are they non-judgmentally curious about me? And then ask yourself, to reverse it then, am I this person for someone else or am I not? And why? What, then ask those very specific, what specifically am I not doing that I need to include in my life to be that person that people cannot wait to see? So if you do that, people want to buy whatever you're selling because no one cares what you're selling. They just want you in their life. And if you can provide a service or a product that solves a pain point and they can't wait to see you walk through the door, that's a recipe for a great relationship.
I love it. And you mentioned 3 of my favorite books in one big swoop there. So
oh my gosh, I'm an avid reader. I love consuming great information from beautiful human beings.
I'm sure our bookcases look very similar, Robin. You said earlier buyer's remorse, and you spoke about it in a sense of it sounded like you were talking about it from your past and your job. Now, for the listeners, and obviously we got there in the beginning, you didn't work in sales, you worked in the FBI, but a lot of your analogies, and when I've heard you talk about the FBA like you were selling or you were working a sales job. Why is that?
We're all in sales. Every time we're having an interaction with a human being, it's not like sales, as the common, kind of surface definition of sales is. Sales is you. Can you inspire someone to include you in their life? Because we're social beings. We're genetically and biologically coded to interact in a very good, healthy manner. And so when you're selling, you're basically offering someone the opportunity, if you can solve something in their life, and solving something in life is not like a product or a purchase they're trying to make. Making them feel good, giving the greatest gift you can give another human being, and that's the gift of presence. How often during the course of anyone's day does someone sit there, ask you about you, can't wait to hear about you, they're curious about the challenges and priorities and things going on in your life, they're not judging a word out of your mouth, and they can't wait to hear the next thing. They're exploring your origin story, and they're doing so without an agenda, without an ask, without asking the question because they can't wait to share more about them. That is what you're selling. You're selling the ability to make someone really satisfied in who they are. And so in the Bureau, when I was selling in the FBI, I was selling a very simple service. I was selling American patriotism, that's the analogy I use. And my only customers I had was very, very small potential client pool. These were Russian intelligence officers that are working when I was in New York at the United Nations. So I had like between 20 and 40 potential clients. I had 10 salespeople, in other words, people on my squad. Our job was to sell this service to a very small pool of people that most likely did not want that service. And it was illegal for me to cold call, so I couldn't even initiate contact. And so that is a very tough sales business to be in. And at the core of it, what are you doing? The only job in life is to discover who has a challenge, priority, or pain point that I have a resource for that I can solve for them. And if it's a elderly parents that are getting sick and infirmed, or they wanted better education for their kids, or they simply do not like, or they abhor Putin's regime. These are pain points in someone's life. I have services and resources that can solve those pain points. And if they can couple that with, they can trust me with their life, that's a good balance. So that's what my job was. And so it's what we do every day in every situation with everyone. No matter what that service is we're selling, we're still inspiring someone to want to include us in their lives.
But I tend to see a lot of people just fall through life. I don't know if this is the right way to describe them, but as non-playable characters, and they don't care about themselves or engage with others. So if somebody's listening to this and they are an NPC, as I like to call them, how do you get better at that? How do I say, you know what, Robin, I want to listen to you without an agenda, and I just want to really be level 3 active listening? Where do I start? How do I get better at that?
Like everything in life, you got to put in the reps. Another favorite author of mine, Joshua Metcalf, he wrote Chop Wood, Carry Water, and another one called Pound the Stone. And then when you couple it with, since you mentioned you love Robert Greene's book, Mastery and the Laws of Human Nature, those two books, it really just talks about, in order to hit that mastery level where we start getting muscle memory on these things, one, you have to not fear the start. You must begin. And to begin with, you can do the one thing that each of us is born as the only survival mechanism we have, curiosity. It gets snuffed out for a lot of us around 6 years old because we're asking our parents too many questions. They're just saying, shut up, I'm done with you. And so the curiosity kind of gets stamped down, and school systems say, just sit here, listen to what I'm going to tell you. So a lot of times these things in society get tamped down early on. But here's the greatest thing with curiosity. So if curiosity in you has been stamped down, you can reignite it. A simple thing you can ask during a meeting, during engagement, or even ask yourself is a simple question: what if? Instead of just asking the what questions, which are very powerful because it engages the cognitive frontal lobe of the brain, it makes us solve problems. And then asking that what if, adding that one little word, makes us wonder, makes us kind of get out of the normal situations that we're dealing with and just get curious. With human beings, it's a really pretty profound thing. Think about it, Jack. Here you and I are. Our time and space has collided after an entire lifetime both of us have spent apart. Yet for some reason, we've collided right here. So here's where you have curiosity. Here's the great opening question you can ask any human being to start that. Because once you discover that origin story and that life arc, you can start making those connections to see where overlaps we have. And it really comes down to this. So Jack, what was it all those years ago when you were growing up that inspired you to want to dive deeper and be this great communicator and aspire a podcast? And so that begins that origin story. And then we start filling out the nooks and crannies. That's where curiosity begins. And everyone can do it. You just have to get in the reps.
I love it. It feels a little bit like that what if question. You could use that as a pattern interrupt to get away from the norm of conversation. Okay. Really good. I want to go back. The four keys of communication you mentioned earlier, and also I know that you're big on the 5-step program. So the elusive, I'm not pronouncing it right. The elusive obvious. Did I say that right?
Right. Great job. Yeah, the elusive obvious. My friend Jordan,
and I think
was saying that.
I used that when I messaged you and was like, this would be the elusive obvious for you if you came on. I don't know how good it was, but what are the differences there, the 4 keys of communication and the 5 steps?
Yeah, so I'm a process person. Part of my intuitive brain just likes making these linkages, and I love taking the complex because I don't have a 50-pound brain. I have a very small brain, so I love making linkages between everything and boiling it down to one simple equation. So part of that is the 4 keys of communication. This is something that was laid down as a gauntlet for me, a challenge back when I was still in the Marine Corps, very young officer. My dichotomy between self and others is still way out of balance. I misinterpreted being popular and gregarious and outgoing as natural-born leadership. No, it's natural-born really self-centeredness because I love making it about me. Leadership is not about me. Leadership is about being of service to others and solving challenges and problems and pain points of others and being the inspiration that can move the ball forward in that. And so when I came in last in my first rankings in the Marine Corps, dead last, again, the only superpower I had, if you can even call it that, was I'm not a wound collector. I never have been. So when something negative happens, I don't say, woe is me, it's all your fault. No, I said, all right, I'm doing something wrong. I own it. What, not why, what specifically did I do and what am I going to do to fix it? So I go to my major who rated me last and I said, all right, what am I doing wrong? And he goes, that's easy. Be a better leader. Okay, that's kind of nebulous. I go, how do you do that? And he goes, that's easy too. You need to make it about everyone else but yourself. Without a frame of context, those are empty words. I had no idea what he's talking about because in my mind, and this is where we make great connection with human beings, never assume your context is out of someone else's context. Dive deep to get context. In other words, what's their life story? What's that life arc? Because for some reason, they're incongruent with what they were saying, what they're doing. And so when he said you need to make it about everyone else but yourself, I had no idea what he's saying. So it became my life's mission to figure that out. And so these four keys of communication were born of this. And so here's what you got to do. If you want to inspire someone's brain to release all the good, feel-good drugs, serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin, dopamine, all the pleasure centers firing, you need to demonstrate how you value them, how you want to affiliate with them, and how you can make them feel safe. And when these four statements, either cascaded together or one at a time, are infused in at least everything you're saying and doing, and it doesn't matter whether in person, virtual, texting, email, just make sure it's about them. By number one, seek their thoughts and opinions instead of sharing your own. 2, speak in terms of their priorities, pain points, and challenges instead of yours. 3, be non-judgmentally curious about them, that life arc, that story. In other words, curiosity, deep curiosity. And curious about what it is they want to share, not necessarily what you want to learn. You really got to make it about them. Some people might not want to share certain things. So if you're curious and you want to learn and you press, it's not about them. It's now back about you. So be curious about what it is they want to share. And finally, 4, empower them with choices. And it doesn't matter whether it's 2 or 3 or just using that word if makes things a choice. So when you imbue at least one of those things into every statement, every conversation you're having, the entire shift goes from you, which was naturally what I was doing, to them. And when you think about that person you love walking through that door, that you can't wait to see and have this conversation with, and it doesn't matter what role they fill in your life, whether it's a friend, a family member, or a great salesperson, a boss, a leader, anyone, they are doing one of those 4 things exceptionally well. And my bet is, most of the time, the ones that you can't wait to see are the ones that are non-judgmentally curious about what's going on in your life, and they can't wait to hear about your challenges, priorities, and pain points, and they're going to sit there and listen to you without judging. Guaranteed.
Okay. Well, this might sound like I need to ask you quite a narcissistic question now, because it might sound a bit silly, but for people that are listening, how do you, for that narrative that you might be telling yourselves, when you want to become the best person and bring these 4 keys of communication into play, how do you control your ego, and how do you wrestle your ego in those situations? Because we know that ego can be a deadly thing that can spark up and say, I feel like I've made it enough about them, what about me now? And I see it all the time.
Yeah.
How do you wrestle that ego?
It is the toughest of dichotomies to balance, because that's what my life, and that's all of our lives is balancing these dichotomies. We can't experience the greatness of things unless we have failure. We can't enjoy a beautiful day unless we've had horrible days. So it's all these dichotomies. And this dichotomy that you mentioned is really the dichotomy of humility and confidence. It's a very tough one to maintain. It is the toughest, because once you have success in acting the 4 keys of communication, you're going to see the world light up. People can't wait to see you. And then you're going to get a sense of, hey, look at me. I got this down. And then it fails. And so it becomes this yo-yo. So what happens is, it's really critical in life to have what I call a loving critic. We can't do this alone. You need someone that is close to you, whether it's personally and professionally, that gives you honest feedback objectively. They do so because they care deeply about you, but not necessarily the outcome that you're searching for. Because when we're emotionally tied to what we're trying to accomplish, a lot of times we make really poor decisions and choices. And a lot of times we lack the context of what we look like to the outside world. So always do your own after actions. Assess the words you say. Assess the impact on others. Are you making people feel comfortable and safe and open with you, or are you inducing stress and discomfort in them? So it's constantly replaying the conversations you had, the impact you had on others. If you have objective third parties and loving critics who can give you feedback also. A great example is I do a lot of TV appearances for true crime stuff and different things. Before I post anything on my YouTube channel and before it goes out, my wife reviews absolutely everything. It won't go out without her seeing it. Every opening, I'm in the middle of finishing my next book. Every opening segment of every single chapter, I read out loud to her, because if it doesn't pass her muster test, it doesn't go out. And the toughest part is taking the feedback if it's not positive. Because we get really defensive, we get really insecure when someone, especially when they're close to us, says something that says, you know what, that's not your best work. Oh, we just rankle at that. But you know what, you got to take it because they are loving critics. And so that's how you start that process of getting better at this. Constantly assessing, constantly assessing, constantly assessing. And again, there is no right or wrong in this. And here's what people love. People love the effort. No one's looking for perfection because no one's perfect at this. Not one human being is perfect at this. We all have moments. Some of us have moments up here, some moments down here, but we all have moments. But what people are looking for is they're looking for effort. They're looking for vulnerability. That's part of that trust. In other words, does this person know when they screw up? Are they willing to own it when they screw up? And do they have a process in place to overcome it when they do? What are they going to do to right it? And when they bring that competence to bear also, in other words, they can solve problems. They just had a moment, they owned it, and they're moving forward. That is the greatest instiller of trust you can possibly do because it makes someone feel safe. It won't makes, you can't make anyone do it. It inspires someone to feel safe.
I love it. You were hinting there at obviously emotional attachment to anything. Like you say, it's one of the biggest downfalls I see in salespeople when I do a lot of sales training and things like that. If you're emotionally attached when you go into a conversation, that this conversation has to end in £1 million deal, it has to. You're never at your full potential. You ask the wrong questions. You don't listen. So that emotional attachment is huge. So the four keys of communication, that they're brilliant. The five steps. Then what's the difference there, and why should people be using them?
Sure. So, and I apologize, I forgot about the 5 steps you asked about. It's kind of taken the 4 keys, which are an element of the 5 steps. It's just making a human engagement a thoughtful process about what we are doing. And the number one thing when we're going to inspire trust is understand what your why is. You know, what's that overarching why? What's the mission? What are you trying to accomplish? You know, as on the FBI, my why was protect the national security of the United States and our NATO allies. That's a big why. Under there is the what, the how, and the who. So part 2 of the first step of understanding that big why, what's the objective, whether it's the sales, whatever, the mission of the company, mission statements, that's the big why. The what, the how, and the who is underneath, because that's what has to remain flexible. And most importantly under that is the who, because we have to identify beautiful individuals that we need to ally with, partner with, and forge trust with in order to fix these problems, in order to do whatever it is we're going to do to forge forward. And so understanding the who. So step 2 of the code of trust is those individuals who I've identified that are part of our why. What are their priorities? What are their dreams, aspirations, long-term, short-term, professional, you name it. What are their priorities, challenges, and pain points in their lives? Because if we need to partner and ally with them, we need to understand what those are, because we need to be able to talk in terms of those things with them. Step 3 is context. Their context, the people that we want to ally with and partner with, what's their context? How do they see the world through their optics, their demographic, their ethnicity, their generation, that life arc? Because this is part of a understanding where they're coming from, understanding how they problem solve, understanding how they interact with the world, and also an ability to find common ground where we can actually say, hey, we're more alike than we actually think. I have worked 22 to 24 different nationalities throughout the course of working counterintelligence in my entire life. There's never been an instance where I had a problem aligning with someone or forming a commonality. Because you know what? We have a lot of things in common. We're all born, we're all going to die, and we can't control time. Those things are pretty universal. And if we can find common ground with, in other words, one of my favorite things is favorite family traditions growing up. You know, a favorite food, a favorite holiday. Doesn't even have to be the same. But when we share favorite memories, that's common, because we all have traditions that we kind of gravitate to, no matter what they are. That's where you can show that curiosity. Step 4 in the code of trust, using great language for the interaction. So we know who from step 1 and what we're trying to achieve. Step 2 is we understand the priorities, challenges, and pain points of that person. Step 3, we understand their context so we can form affiliation there. And step 4 is using great language, which is the 4 keys of communication. So when we're communicating, we want to make sure we're seeking their thoughts and opinions, talking in terms of their priorities, validating them with that non-judgmental curiosity, and giving them choices when appropriate. Then step 5, putting it all together. How do we craft a beautiful engagement with this human being to make it all about them and collide together, really, to move forward whatever it is we want to do together?
How do you make sure, because it sounds great on paper, but I feel like so many people will take that and run with it and deliver it, and it will be delivered in the most insincere way that you could possibly deliver it. So how do you take all of that and make sure that it's not delivered insincerely?
One step at a time with it. Going from 0 to 100 is very hard. Another favorite author, James Clear, Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits just talks about taking one small step at a time and make it repeatable, make it a habit in your life. I will say this, though. One way to be genuine and sincere, I go back to transparency. If you are listening to this and you want to put all these things into great practice because you have some self-awareness that says to yourself, I could be doing this better. I've really done it pretty miserably from time to time. And you're going to put in the action, tell someone. You want to be vulnerable? Be transparent. Say, listen, I just listened to this great podcast. I learned about these 5 steps to the code of trust. I learned about these really 4 great keys of communication. I'm going to do absolutely my best to put them in play because I want to make sure I'm making this entire conversation about you. Please let me know if I fall short of this. And if you have any questions along the way, let me know that as well. Let's go. So because what did you just do? You lifted the veil up. You're being what I call very congruent between your words, actions, and deeds, which does not come across as creepy. Creepy salesmen look creepy and make you feel creepy because they're saying one thing and they're feeling another thing. They're very incongruent. They try pressing tempos that are out of sync with what they're saying. They're pressing the tempo of the other person that's out of sync with the tempo that they're comfortable with. That's generally what's making that uncomfortable feeling with people is insynchronicity with their words, actions, and deeds. So if you actually want to put a new process in place to make it about someone and you're worried about it being genuine, sincere, tell them. It's the greatest, it's the simplest thing in the world. Going back to what you said earlier, Jack, it is the elusive obvious. You want to forge great trust and just share with people what it is you're trying to do. If you're on just think about this. If you're on a timeline where your boss or your organization says you have to make this sale and you have to make 5 within the next 5 minutes or you're fired, go. The worst thing in the world you can do is pick up a phone and try to press someone that's uncomfortable with a time constraint. Because all you're going to do is waste their time, not get the sale, as opposed to just saying, listen, I really apologize for if this is going to be a waste of your time. Here's what I'm currently going through. Here's what we're trying to do because of this current promotion, whatever we're going through. If you're interested, please let me know. I'll continue. If not, I'll let you go right now because I don't want to waste your time. How simple is that?
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, it rings so true with us. We do cold calling for a living. We start our calls with, I'll be honest, it's a sales call. You can slam the phone against the wall or let me have 30 seconds.
There you
go. It's honest, it's upfront, it's disarming that chimp part of the brain. There's some interesting parts there. I feel like the big message there, it sounded like accountability and like holding up that ugly mirror and kind of holding yourself accountable for that. Clarification. Why is that so important? And how do we ask better clarifying questions throughout those 5 steps?
Clarification on both sides is really good because it makes people feel safe. Because if people don't quite understand what it is you're doing or what it is you're trying to ascertain or why you're interacting, it doesn't make them feel safe. I would always end my first conversation with a potential human source that I'm trying to recruit for the FBI with a very simple question. Please ask me any questions you have whatsoever, because once we leave each other and if you ask yourself, I wonder what he really wanted, I have totally failed you. Because then you're leaving with a creepy buyer's remorse feeling, wondering. Leave with no wonder. I want you to completely understand absolutely everything and the why, the what, and the how behind my entire, interaction with you. And most importantly, what's in it for you? I literally offering a very simple thing. I was offering people the opportunity to do something patriotic. That's the only service I was selling. If that's something you're interested in, even if you want to dabble in it, hey, we'll take a dabble. We'll dip our toe in the water. If it's not for you, great, we'll walk away. But if it is, fantastic. And again, it's forward, it's transparent, it's open.
Okay. And I was wondering if I could get your opinion. I feel like I'm just using the keys of communication now, but I genuinely wanted to get your opinion on something. I've been having a lot of heavy debate recently about alpha versus beta when it comes to interacting with humans. And I've heard conversations that say if you're going to interact and you need to prove your authority, you have to be an alpha. And if you ask permission-based openers and you're too upfront and honest, it's very beta. I wanted to get your thoughts on that when it comes to the psychology of interacting with people. Is there a disadvantage from coming across as beta? Is there such thing? Should you be trying to strive to be alpha all the time? What are your thoughts on that, Robin?
I think the only disadvantage is guessing at what the other person needs. I think it's being flexible to what the other person needs in the moment from you to feel safe. It really just comes down to that. Every human interaction that we have is what are you going to do to inspire them to feel safe partnering with you on whatever it is you're trying to partner with. If someone is more in a position where they need more of an authoritative, take charge hand in their life to kind of guide them because it's a new area that they haven't been down before and they want to defer, that's time to be an alpha. If they've been down this road before and they have a lot of reps and they might not view you in the same light that you view yourself, they're going to want you to take the back seat until they feel more comfortable with you so they can feel safe. So then it's time for you to back off. Again, these aren't things you have to do. These aren't right or wrongs. It's just assessing what does the other person need to feel safe with you. And because if you try a one-size-fit-all, you're going to have the experience that most of us have. Success, failure, success, failure, success, success, failure, failure, failure. And why? Here's why. Here's what's going on. Again, going back to the what. What's going on that's creating those success failures? You've created one success, maybe two or three, using a specific model that worked because you were focusing on what you were doing, the behaviors you needed to have. Well, that's great for 1, 2, and 3 persons, but 4, 5, and 6 needed you to be someone else for them in that moment. And you didn't adjust because you were too focused on your agenda and not focused on what they needed.
Brilliant. Really, really good. I think a lot of people listening to this will be thinking about practical tips and tricks. And one of the tips that I got from you that I really enjoyed you talk about was intentional misstatements.
Right.
Can you run us through them and how we should be using them and where we should be using them and why?
So it's part of elicitation. It's probably the most powerful elicitation tool you can use. It's called intentional misstatements or presumptive statements, as my friend Jack Schaefer wrote, the Truth Detector, states. I'm going to first redefine elicitation because eliciting information when someone doesn't know they're giving valuable information that they probably shouldn't be giving. I like what Jack Schaefer talks about being a truth detector. In other words, this is all about inspiring someone to be trustworthy and share truthful veracity information before they have an opportunity to lie to you. And so in order to do that, if you can inspire them to share truthful information with you before they have an opportunity to be deceptive, it's a really good technique. And so the presumptive statement or intentional misstatements is literally appealing to the other person's need to correct other human beings. Because we have a need to correct other human beings because we want to feel included, we want to feel valued. And so if someone hears a bit of information that they think is wrong, they don't particularly agree with, 9 times out of 10, they're going to correct you. And so if we use a presumptive statement, because you're not quite sure on how someone feels about a situation, you're not sure about what level of comfort they have with spending, you can bracket things. So, I've dealt with clients like you before. Most likely you're comfortable, spending in between the $15,000 to $20,000 bracket. No, we're more, and so they're going to correct you. So no, we're more in this area. If you're going for, the simple things like people go for dates of birth or something silly like that, I call them carnival tricks. You can say something simple as to, hey, so I'm pretty good at this. I generally guess looking at you, kind of hearing about you, you're born in what, June? You'll say no, July. On the 4th? No, the 16th. And so just by making a presumptive statement, I got your date of birth without even asking a question, because it's all about inspiring someone to share information and being truthful before they have an opportunity to lie. Because once you ask direct questions, guards go up, shields go up. They start asking again. If you don't have trust, if you don't have an alliance already, it's going to really be off-putting. So it's just a technique.
I love it. Well, I use a lot of labeling and mislabeling. So that's obviously like that. It sounds like, feels like it's more just, but I love it. You say one thing and people want to run in and help you, especially in the world of cold calling. People, I thought I needed to speak to John in this department. No, you need to speak to Kevin. Oh, right, okay. It's Kevin now.
Right.
It opens up
also
doors.
A great way to, you don't even have to be intentional with it, because when you're being transparent and vulnerable and just sharing the things you actually don't know, and you can actually demonstrate your competence at the same time, and you inspire all the other things of trust, they're going to share with you. And so that's why I've kind of graduated up and out of intentionally using skills and tools and techniques to elicit information, because it's playing with a human being. I don't like playing with human beings. But when you take it to that next level, like you're saying, where it just becomes part of who you are to have a great open conversation, the things you'll need will naturally come along. But in order to get to that level, yes, you have to put in the reps at the other level. You have to, in other words, in order to paint art, you have to paint by number first. And so it's, using presumptive statements or intentional misstatements or appealing to a human being's need to correct others is a great way to start getting reps in, no doubt.
And before we kind of wrap things up, I've loved this, Robin. I could talk to you all day, and it's one of those conversations I could honestly, I just want to press pause, go back and listen back to it and be like, right, let me write. I've been writing notes as we go along because there's too much good stuff here.
We've covered a lot of content. We've covered a lot of content, no doubt. Good stuff.
I love it. Empathy. Why is it important?
Empathy. Empathy is the most important thing in the world. It's a word I'm trying to get a little bit away from, only because it's been so cliche. Everyone uses it. And anytime it gets too cliche, people tend to gloss over it. So I kind of take empathy to another level, which is deep context. Or as I say, I just actually literally included this in my next book. It's active curiosity. Instead of active listening, I'm using active curiosity, which is empathy. In other words, just dive deep to figure out what the other person's optic is on the world. Brene Brown is great at saying in most of her books, if you don't understand someone, good, get closer. And another one, it's called The Neuroscience of the Brain. And they quote another thing I really loved is, everyone says, in order to have empathy, it's about walking, a mile in someone else's shoes. Well, if you don't take your shoes off first, you're going to get blisters. So it's literally letting go of your agenda, your biases, your confirmation biases, and walking a life in someone else's shoes to get that context. And how do we get that? Discovering that life arc. Human beings are exceptionally predictable. Not in the micro, I can tell you're going to pick up this pen right now. It's predictable in their decision-making processes, how they're going to respond to stress, how they're going to respond to elation, how they're going to make choices to move forward in life once you understand that life arc. Because once you understand that life arc and understand this core principle that what makes us all predictable is we're always going to act in what we think is our best interests in terms of our safety, security, and prosperity for ourselves and those we care about. All you have to do is figure out what they think that is from their optic, and you can now gauge that decision-making process and not judge it. Because, again, walk a mile in their shoes. And so what's that? That's empathy. I
love it. Robin, thank you so much. I think it's been an incredible conversation. One last quick question. And you can choose one of your own if you want. But if somebody's listening to that conversation and they want to get better at all of these things, what's the one book that they should read?
Everything's life is a sequence and a journey. There is a tremendous amount of great resources. We named a lot of books out there during our conversation today. My books are simple. It starts with "It's Not All About Me," the top 10 techniques to quick rapport with anyone. It's 25,000 words. It'll take you about 2 or 3 hours to read it. Same thing if you listen to it on Audible. It is literally the start I did back in 2010 when I put it together. And so it starts with that. But anything by Joe Navarro, Ryan Holiday, Robert Greene, The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier. You have Joshua Medcalf with his Chop Wood, Carry Water, Pound the Stone, Win in the Dark. I mean, I could name them forever. And I think I said Ryan Holiday and all the Stoicism books he writes as well. Absolutely a fan of all of it. And also history. I can't overemphasize enough about reading history, reading great biographies of individuals that are amazing human beings, but realizing every human being has flaws, challenges in life. And the overarching thing I've seen with the greatest human beings that have walked this earth that have been remembered mostly positively, they have unbridled, non-judgmental curiosity. Whether it's a Leonardo da Vinci, a Benjamin Franklin, or Mahatma Gandhi, all these people had unbridled curiosity towards the human condition, as well as Albert Einstein too. Another great book.
Incredible. I'm definitely some of the ones that you've thrown out there today that I've never read. I've got a big 6-hour drive on Friday, so I'll be
there. You
listening
go.
to those.
Dive deep.
Robin, if people want to work with you, read your books, follow you, check out your YouTube that has been vetted by your wife, where should they find you? How can they find you?
Before I promote myself, I want to make sure people do the most important thing, and that is hit like, hit subscribe, and reshare what you do with as many people as possible, because Jack puts in a lot of effort and a lot of time to put these things together, to reach out from people, to take a risk to reaching out to someone, to have them come on the show and put together a lot of research to make it happen for others. So please do that so that the world can benefit from knowledge that he puts together for others. And yes, to find me, it's really simple. Peopleformula.com, all one word, peopleformula.com. Name's Robin Dreeke, Dreeke. Google me, you'll find everything. Yes, I have a YouTube channel, I have my own podcast. Got another book coming out, hopefully this fall. I'm excited. I'm very excited. I'm just about done. I'm literally working on the last chapter as we speak right now.
Incredible. We'll include all those links in the comments as well. Thank you so much, Robin. Very, very kind of you for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.